Cool. So yeah, guys, thanks for coming. Today we've got a pretty awesome person. So Ben actually helped start Spark. He's one of the co-founders from back in the day. He was an MBA at the time, and you were self-taught web developer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So self-taught web developer, and out of his MBA, he actually got a job at a consulting firm doing web development. So he's going to talk to us today about JavaScript, which is your guys' topic starting Thursday. So you guys will get a good little sneak peek on that. Yeah, he worked there, that freelance firm for a while, and then now is actually just doing his own independent consulting. So,
cool.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks. I wish there was do we have a stand that I could put the computer up here?
This thing extends.
Oh, that does? That'd be good. All right, Simon, Victor, Fabio, Chloe, Gigi. Ben. Oops. No names, and luckily I don't have 22 names to learn.
How's that?
That's what, yeah, with the right head. That's about right, yeah.
It goes down by
sections. Okay. Cool. So, I don't know if this one else. Yeah, so I mean, his intro was good. Let's see where the camera is.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
It gets good audio and it gets the screen. So
Cool. Yeah, his intro is a pretty good intro. I wanted to speak about JavaScript because that's what I'm passionate about. Some people say that JavaScript is the only true object-oriented language, and that's because everything in JavaScript is an object. Functions are objects, and because of that, you can do a lot of cool stuff with JavaScript. So yeah, I'm self-taught. I started coding back in 2009, actually 2008. I was in a Big Lots store, department store, whatever they call them, and there was a box on the shelf, and it said, build your own website, and it was web.com, horrible website builder, but I would drag an image over, and then I would toggle to see the code, and then it's oh, that's how you make an image show. And then I would make it wider and do something with it or add a box, and then it's oh, that's the styles that create that. And so that was fast forward a lot of years, did some work for some clients, got an MBA, and then took a job at Voltage, which is an agency. And agencies are pretty cool because you don't work on the same project every day. It's constantly new stuff, and we got to the point where we would crank out a full website within 2 weeks from start to finish, and so you get a lot of experience. And I got a lot of experience particularly with JavaScript because JavaScript is a lot of what runs front-end websites. You've probably heard of jQuery. jQuery is a framework it's a JavaScript framework that you use to do cool stuff like Ajax posts. Does anyone know what Ajax is? Who can describe what Ajax is?
Asynchronous JavaScript and XML, but most people use JSON because XML is it's used for asynchronous calls to a server to get data.
Yeah, so you can do some really cool stuff with that, instead of reloading a whole page every time you land on a new web page, if someone clicks on a link or clicks on a button, you could just ping the server, grab the new piece of content that you want to show, and just show that instead of reloading the whole page. So it helps facilitate the way the internet really should work, which is you should never reload data if you've already loaded it once. And there's some cool frameworks and stuff like Angular, React. There's a new one called Riot that help facilitate some of that interaction to really make the web work right and not like it used to, where every piece of content on the web was an HTML page. So what I wanted to do today is maybe walk through some JavaScript snippets that I've created, snippets that I use a ton in my work, and then maybe answer some questions. We could take a look at like some frameworks like Angular or React, talk about those a little bit.
We did. One person gave an Angular.
Oh, you already did
Ask
Angular.
talk. Yeah.
Cool.
That
We don't have to do that. I'll just focus.
probably wouldn't hurt to talk about it more.
Talk about it again. Okay. Well, I'll start with some of my code snippets. I don't know if this is going to work actually. No mouse. Let's have like a floating mouse. A lot of my code snippets are on GitHub. So you guys are free to like come and grab some of these, and I can send this in an email maybe.
Or I can put it in
I'll
Slack.
send it to you.
Yeah. We have a group Slack, and I can just send it to everybody.
Okay. So let me just take notes on what I want to send you. Okay, so it's in my repository code snippets. These, like I said, these are code snippets that I use a ton to do all things front end. So probably the one I use the most is a model. Who knows what a model is? Modal.
It's a little like pop-up basically that everything else on the screen kind of like fades away, and you just have that one pop-up.
Yeah, so there's a lot of plugins for this type of front-end animation called modal. jQuery UI has a built-in modal with some styles. Being that we did tons of custom stuff, every website had a different type of modal. They wanted it to look different, they wanted it to close different. I had to create this folder with a bunch of code snippets so that I could easily deploy a modal no matter how the client wanted it to look. So an example of this is on a website I built for Big Chill. Do you guys know who Big Chill is? You ever heard of these guys? They're a local company. You can't really see. I'm trying to zoom out. So they sell high-end fridges, stoves. Some of them look retro, some of them look more updated. Very expensive. They're like, I think the stove is like, or just this thing alone is like $3,000. Yeah. So they're crazy. They have like celebrities put them in their kitchen and stuff. But a modal is like this, where you click on a video. So it's never good to have a video load right here, right? Does anyone know why? You'd never want to load a video right away.
Slows down the page.
Slows down the page. So the page speed is very important. And so you'd always load a small image, and then you'd click on the image to show the video.
What if you wanted an image like playing in the background or something? Is there a way to make it so it's quicker?
So like an HTML5 video playing in the background.
Sure.
Yeah, so that is one case where you would load a video. And typically videos will, in that case they'll, they won't load the whole video, it'll just load the asset and start playing it, or sorry, load it as it plays.
Okay.
So that is the one instance where you would load a video.
You can do like a YouTube too, and then it'll load as it plays, right? A YouTube embed.
There is a plugin that allows you to do YouTube embed video. If on a higher end site like this, we would never use YouTube. We would just like use the MP4 video. But yeah, you can definitely do that.
This is probably a really like obvious question to you guys, but you know sometimes when you go onto a page and like just the text will load or things are loading kind of at different speeds. I guess
In a good way or a bad way?
like that.
Okay.
Is that just because they're coming from different sources and like how do you get around that?
That's a good question. There's a couple reasons why that would happen. Typically, it's because people are trying to load images that are way too big for the space, so the image loads very slow. You should always optimize the images that you use on a website and make sure that they're the correct size. Don't size them with CSS. There is some, that's more of a back-end development question too. There are some ways that you can like just have a loader, and then once everything is loaded, it'll show the page.
Yeah, it sounds like it's annoying if you have like a, you know what I mean, the loader's just loading.
Yeah. There are other things like lazy loading that you can do where you'll just load above the fold content and first, and then you'll start loading the rest of the stuff. But that's pretty complicated. Good question. So this is a modal. You click on that, it pops up, it plays the video. So the video didn't load until I pressed that button. And then a modal, typically if I click out here in the black, it'll close. If I click here, it'll close. Sometimes modals have captions. This particular modal plugin has a gallery, a way you can add a gallery to it. So if I click on one of these images in the gallery, I can then go between it. So this is a modal that has a gallery. You can also, with this code snippet that I'm going to show you, you can load another page in the modal. You could just load, like I already showed you could load a video, you could load an image. Lots of reasons why you'd use a modal in front-end development. It's done with JavaScript, and I'll show you that code. Any questions about this so far? Okay. So the code that makes that happen is here. And I wish I could collapse this. Maybe I'll pull up, rather than pull it up in GitHub, I'll pull it up in Sublime. Can you see that? You guys use Sublime, or what do you use to edit? Sublime? Alright, so this will make it a little bit easier to navigate through. So every one of my code snippets has some script, has some styles, and then has some HTML. And there's usually some comments about like what's going to make it work. So we'll start with HTML because that's probably the simplest, and you guys are most familiar with HTML, right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, in comparison with JavaScript, yeah.
Okay. And then probably styles. You're all very familiar with styles as well. Okay. So here's all the HTML that makes this happen. And I use JavaScript to modify this. Typically, I'll put this code snippet at the very bottom, and it'll be hidden based on this class model hidden. And then when somebody clicks on something, I grab this code, I clone it, and then I paste it on top of everything once I've added the image to it. Does that make sense?
I have a suggestion. You want to like close the sidebar, maybe split screen with the JS, and then talk about it side by side.
Oh, the JS. Oh, yeah. Okay. How do I do that?
Command KB.
Command
You can just
KB.
do Command Shift 2.
Well, Command KB to close the sidebar. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I
And
think
then,
went to the split.
I think it's View and then split panel. Or something like that.
It's
Layout.
also Command Shift 2.
Is it? Yeah, it's your knowledge. Yep. And then you can just drag the JavaScript file.
Well, the
over to
JavaScript's
the other column.
in the same
It's
It's
in
in
the
the
same file. Should I just-
Oh, it's in the same file?
Yeah.
It's in the S. What? Oh, it's
He
in
just
the
closed
Oh,
it.
I see. Well, you could just copy the snippet over into a new file temporarily, so you
Okay.
can look at it side by side. And you have to, drag the file over,
Or how do I do
right? You just drag it over to the other side.
this?
Yeah, you have to put it up onto that, and yeah, there you go.
Okay. this may be a complicated one to start with. But yeah, so at a high level, I grab the piece of code, I modify it, and then I show it on the page. And so yeah, in the JavaScript, basically the magic is happening here. So in this, what I'm doing is I'm creating an object, and then inside the object, I'm going to add methods to it. A method is just a function. And inside that method, I have several private variables, and then I have more methods inside that method. What's up?
Next question. On the object, is there a reason that you're using the constructor and not the literal?
To form the object?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean just creating it with the open brackets?
Yeah. So you did a new object.
Yeah, no. It's
Just
about the
reference.
same, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. So,
What are the differences?
I don't really think there are any differences.
Okay. Yeah, I just did it because that's the way I always do it. But yeah, and I could have just typed open bracket, close bracket, and that would have created an object as well. But yeah, good question. So I have a method, and inside that method, I create another object, and this is just so I can pass this object out of the method at the end. I have a bunch of private variables, and then here's my setup function, which is kind of like a constructor in other languages. You guys know what a constructor is? I call this method at the end here. So basically, this is the whole structure of the method. Private variables, a bunch of other methods, and then I call the setup. And in the setup, I think once the setup's done, I pass the object that I created inside here, which was Buie modal. I pass that back out just so I can modify it later on if I want to. And let me know if I'm going too fast or need to explain something a little better. There's got to be some questions about what's going on here. Does this make sense at all?
So the Buie modal active just means that it can be changed. Or is that already written into the code?
This?
Towards the bottom. Custom map.
Oh yeah, so this is my original object. I just keep everything within one overall object, kind of like an application.
Yeah, but what about the method name to it, the Buie modal or Buie modal active?
That's just a variable I chose to name it. So if I wanted to access, after this is run, outside of this function, I would be able to access it inside the custom app function once it's instantiated or created. Does that make sense? Okay. This may be a little too complicated to start with, but you guys are going to learn the basic structure of JavaScript, and maybe I should start there. Well, maybe let's go to a different example. Do a little more simple. How do I get my menu back? Is it Control?
Command KB.
Command KB. Alright, so. find one that's a little easier. This one should be easier. Okay. So here again,
This might be another really dumb question, but the
No.
arrows that you have on the side, is that just like a sublime text thing that you can crunch things back in? Can we just not do that in Cloud 9?
I don't know if you can do it on Cloud 9, but it's a way to minimize code block.
Yeah, I mean, it looks very organized.
yeah, it helps. It helps a lot. Okay, so an accordion. Does anyone know what an accordion is? Okay. Let me see if I can find an example on. Let's see. I built this site before I left Voltage, but they never launched it. Let's see if they launched it yet. No, they haven't launched it. Basically, nothing's coming to mind, but it's like a bunch of boxes, and if you click on one box, it'll expand, and then if you click on another box, the one that was open will close, and then it will expand the one that you want to look at. So this is the code to make that happen. Basically just simple HTML. Over here you'll see the same structure. I always build stuff with this structure because in JavaScript, when you create scope is very important in JavaScript. So if I were to have a variable called scope equals hello, and then I had a function, and inside this function I have another variable called scope equals not hello. What do you think's going to happen if I console log that? You know. So does everyone know what all these things mean? Probably, maybe not, because they haven't learned the JavaScript.
What's console log? Does that mean you're outputting it?
It's like puts
Print
in
it out?
Yeah, so on every website, every browser, if you, I never found my mouse word. If you inspect the element, I'll show it over here. You guys familiar with doing this? It has a console right here, and so that whatever I console log will print here for debugging mostly. In fact, it's only for debugging because in older versions of IE, if you console log anything, it breaks the whole website. So, yeah, you should always build stuff to not console log in live mode. But good question. Okay, so, yeah, that's the way I print it. And the question is, will this variable be hello or not hello? And the answer is it will be hello still. Even if I did this, well, if I did that, it would be not hello. Does that make sense? So have you guys talked about scope with other languages? A little bit?
You mean like private and public variables?
Yeah. So when I put a variable here, a var here, it makes this a private variable. And so when I console log this, it will still be hello. But if I get rid of that, it will be not hello. And if I were to console log, if this were var something,
I think it would still be below, actually.
would it?
Yeah, because functions are hoisted to the top. So it would still be below.
Even without the,
Yeah, even if you make it a global.
let's see, I didn't know that.
It's one of those weird jobs.
But if you tried to console log, how sure are you about that?
90%.
90%?
Yeah. we could run it in Chrome just to check.
Yeah, I don't have this anywhere where it could run.
That's going to be undefined.
Yeah, that'll be undefined. Because I declared the variable inside the scope of a function of another object, and so it'll be undefined. I'm pretty sure we take the
I'm
var
just,
away.
if you want to test it real quick, I'm curious.
I have too, because I would think that it would be hello, but
Yeah. Have you,
Yeah, if you just put a global scope inside a function and then copy and paste that right into Chrome, I'm pretty sure it's still going to be hello.
paste this whole thing in?
Yeah, we'll change something to just scope.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's test it.
Just paste it right. This is like I repeat and repeat. Oh, you're missing something.
Because maybe it needs to not be anonymous.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, function needs a name.
What? That should work.
Maybe it's the spaces that you're using. Console gets confused. Like you might want to just pull scope all the way back on line 5.
Oh, that?
Yeah, if you use the tab, it gets confused.
Yeah, because sublime tabs are.
Yeah.
Okay, I will learn something.
You can try and do line by line. With that.
I can Google it later.
Yeah,
Maybe just give function a name. It doesn't.
So how would you, could you access like not hello somehow? Or just within the function?
do what?
How do you access, not hello somehow? Or would it just be able to be,
Only within the function, or if I pass it out.
okay,
But I think this should change it. If it were a private function, I'd have to pass it back out. So give it a name, so function. I always do it this way. Function equals, do I put the name before or after?
You could make it a variable or something, or you could do it after. Actually, if you make it a variable, then it's not hosted, so it would be function space whatever name. I don't know, just call it test one.
Okay. So the theory is that this will be.
Yeah, it should still be hello.
Still be hello. It is, yes. and then define. Nice work. So yeah, but scope is really important in JavaScript, and that's why sometimes I get like these. Well, for instance, that's the reason. If I wanted to get not hello, I would have to. I'd have to like return. That's kind of surprising me. So if I wanted to get that out, I'd have to be like return scope. What's that? Yeah, but I could get it by our function equals.
Yeah, if you do it that way, then it'll be not hello. Because when you assign the function to a variable,
Okay.
it's declared, not expressed function is what it's called, I think.
Okay.
And it's not hoisted to the top of the file, so it's
Oh,
still
I
come
see.
below our scope. So now it should say not hello.
Just by putting the var in front.
Yeah, just by using that style. There's 3 ways to create a function like that: the declared function, and then the constructor function.
Yeah. Okay. So if I were to do scope equals func, that would also change scope because I return
Yeah,
the scope out of there.
yeah.
So that's kind of a topsy-turvy discussion on scope, but scope is very important, and a lot of times when you're like, why isn't this variable what I want it to be? It's some weird rule like that, like, oh, you didn't put var in front of the function. But most of the stuff I build in this way so that I know exactly what's in scope and what's out of scope and what all my variables are, and I can access them at any time. So I always create a method. I create an overall app, and then in that app I create a method. And then in that method I create another object for that method. Once it runs, I can then in setup I'll return it. Back to the accordion, basically what's going on here is I'm calling this function in my document ready. Is everyone familiar with what a document ready is? The what? Sorry, what? Yeah, so it's built into jQuery, and it just basically says that the DOM is ready. That doesn't mean the images are loaded, it just means like the DOM, which is the HTML structure of the page. The HTML structure is loaded, and so jQuery sends a trigger that says, that's basically the DOM is ready, the document's ready. And so I put I call my functions inside the document ready. There's also another event called document load, or actually I think it's window load. Load. And you can also call functions inside the window load, or you can just call them. You can just call them in basically at the very top level. But 80% of the time, stuff is called in the document ready. About 5% of the time, you call stuff in the document load, and then you can call stuff before that as well. What's up?
Do you ever use the shorthand for a document ready?
What is it?
$sign function.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
$, like that?
Yeah.
Without that?
Well, function is wrapped in parent.
Oh, really? So it's basically this.
Yeah.
Cool.
I take that space out between function and the second set of open and close bracket.
That.
Yeah.
Cool. So I call my Buie accordion method, which is a method of my overall app to keep everything in scope and so I know what variables are what. And then in that, when this function is called, basically it sets some variables right away, and these variables are passed. So these are the defaults, and I can also pass in options. And then I create my settings based on the defaults and the options. So extend is a pretty cool jQuery thing where you can kind of merge two objects and you override this object with this object if it has the same keys. Does everyone know what an object key is? Okay, so, sorry if I didn't know where you guys were starting from, so it's kind of hard to, that's why your feedback to tell me if I'm not making sense is really important.
You can use default as an example.
Yeah, so default, I want to add this, so if I wanted to override the defaults.
We've gone over hashes in Ruby a little bit,
Gone over hashes?
which is the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's like hashes. I don't know Ruby, but it must be like hashes.
Yeah.
And I can paste this key in here into the function, and I can override it with new selector. And then, so I pass this object into this function. So right here, my options are whatever I pass into the function here. So these options go into this function. You can't see it, it's right at the end.
You could drag the column number to make it bigger.
Oh, really? Yeah. Nice. So I'm passing this option into here. And you can see that this key, parent selector, matches this key. And so this variable is going to be the combination of an empty object added to defaults, overridden by defaults object, overridden by the options object. So I can, basically I built a function that I can let people customize in certain ways by doing that. And then later on I use these settings throughout the app to set certain elements and stuff. Again, I set up the function with my setup method, and then I call it at the end. If I were to call this at the beginning, it would come back undefined. But one of the reasons I write it in this way is because some people they'll set up a function and then they'll write the setup function last, and then they'll call it. But I set it up in the way that you would read it if I'm seeing this for the first time, and I think that's really important in development. Try to make it as human readable as possible, and a lot of people overlook the importance of that. Always think about what's the next coder going to think when they see my code. And so I put this first, but I call it last. And then inside the setup function, which is kind of like a constructor in other languages, I can call this function even though it's before the function is actually written. Can anyone tell me why I can do that? Hoisting is yeah, that's the complex. I don't even know much about hoisting. You obviously know more about hoisting than I do. But it's because even though I wrote this function here, it's not called till here. So when it's called, this function's already been written, even though it's written after this. And like I said, I do that so it's more human readable. So all I have in my setup function is a call to another function in this object. And this object was created here. I added methods to it all the way down, and then I called this. So when it calls this method, it exists. And then here's where all the magic happens. So in my bind events, basically I'm grabbing a jQuery element or a DOM element. So this is jQuery syntax for targeting a certain place on the page. And I'm calling settings click selector, which is this class. And that class matches my HTML. So when I call that settings click selector, it narrows down every element on my page and says, this is what I want to care about right now. And then I attach this event to it, which is a click event. So it says, whenever this element or set of elements is clicked, I want you to do this anonymous function. Am I going too slow with that, or does that make sense? You good?
Did you write this a while ago?
Yeah.
I think click is deprecated, and the delegated way to do it is on, and then
On.
click inside of Go's common function.
When was side?
I don't know if it's deprecated or just
I don't
like
think
frowned upon.
Yeah, I think it's like you're supposed to
Yeah,
use
because if you do on, it's delegated, so it looks for the class even if it's added to the page in like an Ajax request.
Oh, right. Yeah, that is true. But I don't think it's. Yeah, let's check it. Check it out. jQuery. Usually it'll say here.
I don't know. Deprecated is probably stronger, but definitely on.
So you're spot on with that. So click is a shorter way to write on,
Okay.
but on does have some benefits. Like when something's been added to the page with Ajax, click will not work anymore because click only cares about
What's on the page when it loads.
exactly. Yeah. So basically what you just said, but in a different way. That said, you know, if you're on a page that doesn't have Ajax, you can do it either way. On just takes more characters, but this would be the syntax for on, and handler is just the anonymous function or any function. But yeah, good comment. Okay, so I've now targeted one thing for debugging is, even though my click selector is accordion clicker, and there's only one here, a lot of this will grab every instance of this class on the page. So it'll be an array, basically, of elements, and that's probably the number one debugging thing is, are my selectors targeting the right thing? And so you can console log it, like if this wasn't working or it was working too many times or something, you could just console log this whole thing, and see what it's grabbing. So click selector, click. Inside here, I want to prevent the default. Basically, I want to say, whatever this click was going to do before, don't do it. Do what I'm going to tell it to do. That's what prevent default is. I always set me to be this. This is selected. So this is this element that was clicked. And then I grab it with jQuery so that I can manipulate it.
Is the equivalent of this in Ruby self, basically? It's not the same, but it's like, that's as much of an equivalent as there is.
Yeah. It's not
I know it's not the same thing, but to make a comparison.
So with an accordion, you have widen this up. Then according, you have a div that holds multiple items. And when one of the items is clicked, or
You
when the
can right click
clickers,
this and open it in your browser.
what?
If you right click that page, you can open it in your browser.
I don't know what it is.
Oh, do they
This
not
is
have that on
Windows.
Windows? That's rough. Right click the actual file, like just in the middle of the file. Right click it.
Yeah.
Well, you can reveal it in Finder and then open it, I guess. I don't know if that'll work though, because it's a PHP file.
Maybe it's under View tab.
I don't think it's going to look very good.
Yeah, I just figured maybe. Nice.
Well,
But
that's
it's no
a
big deal.
PHP file, so you'd have to run several locally.
Yeah.
Well, the HTML should work though.
So anyways, it's a div basically with several items in it. And when one of the items is clicked, it expands. And so back over here to the jQuery, or the JavaScript, I need to know I need to know the parent of whatever was clicked, so that then I can close everything inside the parent and then open the one I care about. Does that make sense? So if I click on the first item, I need to know all the other items. I need to know the parent of all the items so that I can then target all the children. There's another way to do that called siblings, but so I grab the parent, and then I grab hidden. What's hidden? Oh, hidden is the portion of text that is hidden on that clicked item. And then siblings. Basically, these are all jQuery methods to grab different things. So, me was the thing that I clicked on. I find the parent so that I can grab in the parent the hidden portion of stuff. I also grab the parent siblings, and then I grab all the parent siblings hidden stuff. Then I slide up. This is a jQuery function that basically just slides whatever you targeted up. It's built in, so it's like a transition. And then I remove the open class, because a lot of times you have states like an open or closed state. So the one that's open may have a different color header or a bold text or something. So I remove open from all the siblings, and then if the parent has the class open, I don't do anything. I close it actually. Looks like what I'm doing here. So if I clicked on one that was already open, I want it to close. And that's what I'm doing here. So I grab the hidden, I slide it up to close it, and then I remove open from the parent. Else, if it doesn't have the class open, I show the hidden content, and then I add the class open, and that's the end of the function. Does that make sense? Okay. Did we learn anything there? Something? Yeah.
What kind of data structure are like the parents and the siblings built from, I guess? Or you said it was built in JavaScript. It's already available to you? That data structure?
So the data structure is based on the HTML. And I'll try to answer your question if I don't answer it correctly. So this is what was clicked. This is the parent. And this is the whatever content was hidden. So when I click here, I find the parent, and then I find the hidden. I add an open class to this. Does that make sense? Is that answering your question? So that's the data structure.
And that's just always, you just can do that and you call that anytime on an object?
Yeah. In jQuery you can call, once you target an element anywhere on the page, which in this case is the thing I clicked, I can manipulate it by adding and removing classes. I can add animation to it.
I think to clarify,
Yeah.
if you should show that settings click selector is the class name of the div that's on the HTML. See, parent, click selector is accordion clicker. And if you look at the HTML, that'll be the name of the class. So that's what you're selecting.
Yeah. So basically, what this is doing is, when I call this is actually an array. And it's adding a click function to every one of these accordion clickers based on the class I added here. Or I added up above when I called the function. Great question.
Why do you choose to use classes instead of IDs?
That's a good question.
Through your,
Because a lot of people are like, hey, why the heck, you should always separate, you should only call IDs with JavaScript and use classes to set styles. You should always separate it. I hear that a lot. You can try to do that if you want. And most people are going to tell you to do that. If you crank out sites like we did, you don't do that because you can't. I want to add a click event to every clicker, right? But I can only have one instance of an ID on a page. If I have two instances, so if I had accordion hidden ID and it wasn't a class and accordion hidden, it breaks JavaScript or causes some errors, or
It's not valid CSS.
Yeah, it's not valid CSS. There's some error. It's wrong. So I could add accordion clicker 1, accordion clicker 2, accordion clicker 3, and make them all IDs. But that adds a level of complexity to the page, and it adds an abstract layer that wasn't helpful in what I did. There's multiple problems with it. It's hard for me to like put them all down on paper. But if you can use IDs, I just found like then I'd have to have a class here to add the styles and an ID, and we would do stuff at such a quick speed that it didn't make sense for us. So I never support that. And nowadays with tools like Sublime, I think one of the reasons people originally said that was because you try to separate it so that you don't have unforeseen bugs. But nowadays you can just like in Sublime search every file that has this class name and easily say, oh, okay, this change to a class is gonna affect my CSS. So, but I'm not in the popular camp with that question. A lot of people would say separate them, so good question. All right, so
It's 7, so
hopefully we learned something.
yeah. And if you guys, are you willing to hang out?
Yeah, I can hang out and answer questions, and yeah, good luck. Hope you guys got 4 weeks left, right?
We still have spring break, and then it's like 3.5, not
3.5
including
weeks.
spring break.
3.5. We're gonna throw you into the wild, right?
Cool. Thanks, man.